Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode, or tonight's episode. Just as something for the listeners to know, there may be additional noises, there may be pauses in the talks, and if you can excuse those, you're welcome. You cannot be afraid of life, only its outcome. And why is this? Why would a human being say that you cannot be afraid of life? There's so many people alive who are afraid, and each, when we look at human psychology, it starts with a reality sphere, where I say it's as if like the body is a sphere, the mind is a sphere, and as the mind sphere, as the person imagined, okay, I'm going too far. I'll bring the music in a little bit after. You cannot be afraid of life, only its outcome, because life is a journey towards a destination. We are all aware of this to some degree. The way we have built civilization, society, people wake up to do activities in the realm. Activities that build up to something. Now, the more consciously you do an activity, the more control you have over your life force. The more unconscious the day is lived, it's not that the person doesn't have control, it's more like the world has the control. It's like that moment where the person doubts themselves and they're like, at least the world doesn't doubt itself, the whole thing, not people in the world only. Nature has a component of just existing, and that's geometrical. That means if people look at life really, it's a space, it's a three-dimensional space. We are existing in this three-dimensional space. Everything that we can speak about, communicate, has a sort of shape. So if one is afraid of life, they require to be afraid of the shape of life. But because life is a dynamic, like a river-like journey, how can one fear without knowing the destination? That means sometimes I feel life is like a roller coaster ride, but a roller coaster ride where nature is moving it, the laws of nature. And in this roller coaster ride, whatever analysis a person has, that's one snapshot in one point of the roller coaster ride. That means everything I have been afraid of, so many of my own personal fears, they evaporated when I got older. Things that a person is trying to have a strategy, when they comprehend and understand it, their strategy changes. There are people who, let's say someone is afraid of the dark, and because they're afraid of moving in the dark, they'll never find the light switch. What I'm noticing, it's not that you cannot be afraid of life. A person can be afraid of anything in this realm. People have fears that other people don't. They say one man's trash is another man's treasure. One man's fear is not another man's fear. As simple as that. That how much of fear is an imposed phenomena, an overlay upon the moment which that overlays outcome. I feel we don't fear don't fear the moment, because if we did, the concept of sacrifice wouldn't exist. All those people who have sacrificed themselves for different things, you know, all the artists that sacrificed, you know, all the engineer, everybody who had to give something of themselves without a certainty of what they will get back. So the concept of sacrifice is a suggestion of, no, it's not that the moment we're afraid of, it's the outcome, right? That means a person driving on a road, on a clear road, there's nothing to fear. Driving on a snowy road, you know, I had an incident where I don't know how, but it was such a blessing where it was snowy, the road was snowy. I was driving from Toronto to Barrie, and as I was driving, there was a turn I wanted to make, and it was in this side road. I don't know how to say it. And when I was making the turn, the right wheel of the car went on this snow, and the whole car strangely was tilting to the right, and I'm moving the wheel of the car left, you know, to try to keep it on the road, and it goes and hits this snow pile, but the snow pile had a curve to it, you know. And anyways, I mean, this is unnecessary to share. But the thing is that there was fear about what would happen, not what I was. That means a person doesn't fear a clear road, but when it's super snowy or something, they fear, and that fear is not that it's like, there's a type of fear, I would say, which is from your inner realms. That fear usually instantly can be gotten rid of if you confront the fear, if you go and see what's behind the veil, what's behind the cover. You know, if a person fears communication, they communicate to see what it is. If the person fears, I don't know, whatever, they just do it to get a sense of what the texture, how the atmosphere of the unknown is. And people have different abilities. It's not like every person can instantly be like, okay, right now I'm going to stop having this fear I've had for many years. It's not. But one can, through understanding, not be in a state of mind where archetypes that are inefficient arise when one sees the fear. A person can see something they're afraid of, and they're like, okay, you know, I'm pretty afraid of it. There's something about, I don't know, honesty, which brings all sorts of ideological methods of analysis, all ideological processing into just this simplicity. That's the power, I would say, of honesty. How honesty can, in some sense, counter fear. Because the person's like, okay, I am what I am, this is it. You know, not that this is it in life, but just the simplicity once accepted, it's like the complexity, then it's on the complexity what it's doing, you know. The fear in the outer realms, there are many people on the planet better than me, and personally I think soldiers, those people who are who have experienced intensity, they are the teachers of the outer realms. But those who have in some sense experienced exploration, they become teachers of the inner realms. And it's not that there's a teacher, there's no such thing, it's just a tribe, and the tribe dares to communicate its dimensions to itself. After walking alone, one notices what they are. Then, after they have realized what they are, it becomes fascinating to see what others are. And I have been, for a long time, holding this role, keeping my concentration on a certain ideal. In the outer realms, I perceive the future of humanity to be the advanced civilization. In the inner realms, I perceive the future of humanity to be advanced communication. Our minds will become everything, our body will become nothing, but in between that transition, in between that, there is the masterpiece of the human effort. That we are these small creatures on a rock that dare to ask the big questions. We are man wondering about God. That's a big question, to wonder about if people came from people, could the universe come from people? I would say it's more in the domain of philosophy, but religious ideology makes it theology, right? So it's like, and it's not, I'm just one person here. It's not my voice to declare what things are in accordance to, like, I speak from my inner realms, and I know that I'm speaking from my inner realms. But if a person can't discriminate between their inner realms, then there's no such thing as imagination and reality. It's all like this mixture of whatever consciousness found next, and yet we can walk way more elegantly as multidimensional beings. Oh, how the human mind dances in the void, not realizing in eternity and the temporary are wings. Intelligence is a flight in a realm. We have been pilots from the start. We have been the advancement of original consciousness in the realm. In the outer realms, my recommendation is, and this is something I'm training myself every day, is that whenever I see fear in the outer realms, to instantly tackle it. And whenever I see fear in the inner realms, whenever my mind is afraid, is different than the body being afraid. I would say the body's fear is like its absence. So my biological existence has a mind, so it doesn't vanish. So it's as if all biological genetical intelligence is like, hey, continue. And DNA, and not DNA, but like I would say the self-replicating gene is like, oh, okay, and it's starting. And it's fascinating how much of our biology is just, again, this discontinuity factor. So the body has a fear of continuity and fear of discontinuity. There's two types of fear, by the way. You can fear the temporary, but if we were immortal, you can fear being immortal. You can fear its length. When it's temporary, we fear its depth. But I would say, like, The body is atomic. Because it is atomic, we say it's mindless, unless we're considering atoms have minds, and I'm pretty sure the scientific community is not ready to wear the jersey of panpsychism. So, so when it comes to what I said, I'm pretty much seeing different dimensions to the human being. I'm seeing that these different dimensions respond differently. It's as if our body is imagined two-dimensional, like a square. The mind is like a cube. And what is beyond the mind is superior. Or I should have used a better example. Imagine the body is like a line. Imagine the mind is a plane. And imagine that beyond the mind is a cube. So we went line, square, and then cube, 3 dimensions. So I would say the body is like the line, the mind is like the plane, and this and like, even though I'm repeating this for you, but I'm it's the image I'm trying to. The body, it is in some sense like we're just the periodic table reincarnating as human beings endlessly. We're just a stardust reincarnating. That means scientists, they don't believe in Buddhist reincarnation, but they believe in, elemental reformation. So, secular society sees matter reincarnating. Buddhist society sees the mind. And the mind is like a fog. And when the fog settles and the one is in a communicating relationship with their own intelligence, one uses their human imagery as an alphabet. So what I mean by that, if there is something more than the mind can't explain it. Or let me say it this way, if there's something more than the body, we can't just use objects to explain why objects move. And if there is a mind, a subject, or the subjective identity, the I thought, some yogis say, the ego, as some angry people say. Beyond objects and subjects, there is a space where both the object, subject, plus more is kept. That plus more, because it surpasses the language threshold, language has no choice but to relate for now to the outer realms until we have proper systems and we fulfill visions of all the continental philosophers and even the psychologists who dared. Carl Jung, he had this quote, he said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That means unless we use whatever we have on this galactic island in the void to in some sense know the unknown, and the ultimate knowledge being is that you can only know the unknown as the unknown. This is why poetry is needed. This is why poetry has always been a sort of portal to the metaphysical. Because it is where language moves from the boundary of humanism. That means good poetry should feel the same as what, like after a person stepping out of a cinema that they saw a science fiction film. Like, it has to have, it has to show you worlds without taking you there, so you want to go. Okay, guys, my attention came to the chat section. Welcome, everyone. And by the way, I say namaste, but the whole mythos, the banner of the of the context I'm carrying is advanced communication. So anyways, Nihal says in the chat section, it is correct that outcome always has an impact, which depends upon what we do and how we do it. So fear, expectations, daydreaming, prediction are all just unnecessary. All just unnecessary. Are all just unnecessary. No. I don't know how many times I need to say no. But no. Everything that is naturally here most likely has an existential, non-linguistic, like we can't put in language, but it's like a thing can have reason by just mere design. That means Aristotle talked about four causes. You can look at something being in a causal position from four angles. So I'm saying you can totally see this thing in regards to the mind. I would say outcome is like when a person drives, if you don't have a direction, you will just waste gas. That's the reality. And in life, if we don't have a direction, and not that we should know the direction, but we should be going somewhere, right? That's the whole point of having a mind, because when we didn't have a mind, everybody was just happening as nature wanted it. Like the environment was our mind, but now our mind shifted from the environment. We put on clothing, we live in squares. We communicate. The sophistication of the human ability to use language, no other species shows signs of this, or we'd be talking to them. So human language is unique. Our species has found a door in the void. And is it necessary to enter or not? That means if somebody finds like a better way something can happen, should they take it or not? And I could be a futurist in this angle, because my inclination is the past always passes you. You can't do the past is past. This was something I heard from Papaji, and I literally laughed for like 30 seconds. That's too long, 30 seconds. But I'm saying it was definitely something where I'm like, oh wow, all my problems of yesterday were yesterday. Right? So the fear of yesterday is easily to vanish. If you don't even remember it, it's not there. The mind is like a light. We don't realize this. It's like when you wake up in the morning, you're a light, and because we have this long evolutionary, like a blacksmith, evolution is just hitting the sword with a hammer. We have this built-in sensitivity with the environment. I would say we have more familiarity being in nature than being outside of it. So my answer to fear, expectations, dreaming, prediction, etc. are unnecessary. No, they're not unnecessary. Everything you can't use is unnecessary to you. Have you noticed? A person can see someone even saying a good idea, but if in their reality they don't care, the idea goes from one ear and leaves the other. Do you know how many people my voice has just grazed them like a wind, and they have never heard me again? Let me tell you, Nahal, The human strategy is advanced civilization. We haven't built the honor for this. There will come an honor to advance ourselves in the future. I'm a extremely early bird. As if there was somebody, the gods are playing a joke, and I was typed too early here. But you see, that's the beautiful thing about nature and about the quality of being. When one is being, there is no doer. Being is so simple, it's strange. Everybody is being. You don't have to put any effort. You just watch how reality is. But when it comes to doing, it becomes outcome oriented, because we really have no reason to put the world in a linguistic box. It's too big. That means if logic is in language, and language is boxing the world, in some sense there's limitations. Now, if the species has a discrimination in the inner realms, I'll tell you this: my purpose in the outer realms, if somebody was like, why are you alive, I would say this is the ideal I've chosen. That means there's a spectrum. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of different storylines you can extract in this realm, and I've chosen what the future needs. But in my inner realms, if somebody says, what about your mind, Mr. Within? What's going to happen to you after this realm? First answer is, I don't know, and I'm content with that. But I would say, if I had to share something that I could, I would say the unknown has nowhere to go. All those people trying to get out of a cycle of karma don't realize it's the narrative that the mind has clothed itself in, that the world is strangely free, and not free like a grocery store food sample, but I'm saying free. It's something where it's as if I remember this was the point in my life where I stepped out of the blind shadows of my youth, where I just noticed, oh my God, it's just a massive movement. All of life is a grand happening. It's just a happening. It's an event, the way our minds can fathom it. And in this event, what can we do? We make ourselves roles. We make ourselves part of the narrative. That means first task of a multidimensional being, choose a dimension. Good job. Second task of a multidimensional being, after choosing that dimension, is in some sense build a narrative. The next task, become a character. Next task, make the character remember beyond the narrative. Next task, beyond the narrative, you have choice, but you don't have choice in the way you can comprehend it now. That means a sign of a completed life is after you're done with it, you're done with it. You see? It's like next, but not a next in time. Beyond the nexus of space. And you say how we do it? 8 billion beings, you tell me. Every person is in their own sphere of reality. Imagine every person had a sphere around them, and that's their inner realms. And how many people do you think are willing to step out of that sphere, try to see the bigger spheres of reality, and as 8 billion human beings attempt to find the original Earth through the original self, and the original self is not characterizable, but it gives character. I hope that was an answer enough, but good questions don't have answers, remember that. Because they're tackling the infinite, they're tackling the limitless. That means the moment it's multidimensional, language is speech is only limited to a certain dimension of possibility of reality. I personally, in my school of thought, how we're being human beings today, using language. Language is 1/4 of what's going on in this world. It's 1/4. That means I am speaking to 1/4 of the realm consciously as an embodied being. Because what else can we do? We either move as objects, it's like, yeah, the body's moving, or we communicate as minds. And we have not cared about communication, and we have not cared about how people are communicating themselves. Right? A lot of anger, a lot of suffering in society. It's as if people have an image of themselves. They go through society, and the turbulence and the stimulus in the environment that makes that image change is the result of how emotional they were that day. So I'm saying, if you look at geometry, you've entered that lens, right? And so in a world where it has so many lenses, I could see this 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, it's like, count as long as you want. In this realm, it's after some point, the person's like, okay, hold on, why so many lenses? And upon the experience of multidimensionality, it's not that that's the finish line. Then comes the wonder of, think of it this way, we're experiencing ourselves on the earth. Okay, we were unconsciously being the earth. We are consciously experiencing ourselves on the earth. In the future, we will consciously be ourselves on the earth and the earth. That's why we have minds. The mind's destination is very different than the body. And I'm using this archaic, three-angle view, body, mind, soul. It's like the person made fun of my mind, but not my soul. Nobody can make fun of my soul. And here's the cool thing. Terence McKenna says, nobody knows enough to worry. I'm a bit worried right now, but I'm happy I don't know enough. So, in a world where everything's turning, to be a shape is literally just a choice. We're choosing. Like communication even has to be a choice, or the person, or it would be kept in the inner realms. That means at some point throughout the day I had to kind of position in my inner realms that I was going to give this talk, and then I start thinking usually earlier than I give the talk about the talk. cannot be afraid of life because we don't know what it is. We know a part of it, a percentage of it is in our conscious mind, and anybody who accepts the unconscious, anybody who knows that they don't know or there's things unknown in the world, this means we are the small and the big. So the small and the big is having an ego to try to fight over who explains the world, you know? If life is a movement and is a force ultimately, that means it's like, I think even though the scientific angle feels its ontology has to be limited to a material reasoning, but matter's explanation is through forces, right? We say a force. It is the effect of a force, you know, which we are finding matter here right now. Matter can be seen as a force. This is why I think secular society loves Star Wars. The idea of the force wasn't religious, wasn't ideological, but it was cultural in regards to, okay, a Jedi's using the force, but in like Star Wars, the force, just that word alone, the force. You know, this can surpass materialism. This could be that it's as if the force behind matter, the force behind everything. There was this very unique speaker by the name of Manly Hall. He said that behind every, if I'm stating this correctly, he says behind every matter, there's a spiritual unit behind every point of matter, like in the space-time continuum. Imagine. What that means is there's a force to everything, and there's a force to even a single cell just being here, right? Now, human beings, we have a personalized relationship with the unknown, so that's all those people who fear, for example, interdimensional archetypes. These interdimensional archetypes, you are fearing how your limited perception of a world so big is interpreting that. That means we are fearing our inaccuracy. That means if we realize that, like, let's say a person, something happens and they're afraid and they don't want to look, right? They don't want to look, even they don't want to see what's there, right? They don't want to even see what's there. So the person, let's say, out of fear, doesn't look. Do you know? But now, when the person thinks about its reasoning, it's like there is no reason for the fear. Like I don't know how to say it. It's like it's not fear. I think we misinterpret the concept. I think there's no emotion of fear. Calling fear fear and emotion is such an outdated, angle. Oh my God. Okay. And it's like if the mind is a river never dies, but a river endlessly is trying to get to the ocean. That means a drop, imagine a drop like a temporary being who can, that's living and dying. It's like the drop of water can evaporate. This drop, and let's say it's on a leaf, and this drop has to find a way to fall into a river. When it falls into the river, it cannot be a drop anymore. They call that nirvikalpa samadhi. It's a type of samadhi. It's a state of attention that the moment the person notices that, they don't go back, you know. And of course, guys, keep this, as Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. That means I encourage the listeners to try to just see the images of what I'm saying, you know. But anyways. you know, some things have happened in my personal life that's slightly my attention is not fully here, but I'll land this plane. Let me see. Okay, I'll keep this as the last song, maybe. Ultimately, what I'm saying is we start individual, and our individualism is our consciousness. Beyond our individualism is the unconscious. Our fear is coming from how our conscious mind is interpreting the unconscious. You cannot be afraid of life in a sense when you're like the tip of the iceberg, when you're a small conscious percentage of this vastness, right? So one cannot fear it, and fear has to do with one's psychology. But when we look at the psychology, isn't it like the body is in a sort of singular position? The mind has various probabilities. Like I can look at an object and wonder about holding it with my right hand, holding it with my left hand, you know, holding it in different angles, looking at it in different angles. But when it comes to like that, looking at it in different angles is the mind. So the mind is the same. You know, you can close your eyes, look at an idea, hold an idea there in your inner realms, and look at it as if like you have a diamond in your hand, a stone, and you're looking at the stone, let's say the philosopher's stone, and you're wondering, what is this? Right? So in the inner realms, it's about how reality is way more than just objects, and it's about controlling subjects, if you notice, right? That means, you know, a person may be controlling, let's say, I mean, there is this view we are the body, but there is also this view that if we were just the body, we couldn't control it. So there has to be something more than the body noticing the body to be able to control it, right? To wield it, unless it's just an algorithm. You see, that's the danger I feel secular society doesn't realize. It is exiling. It is occupying. It is denying the multidimensional. If it feels it is only just the periodic table that has ever been here. The idea of self is arbitrary. A person, it's as if like when they say to the person, do you believe in yourself? And the person's like, you know, it's when you think about that idea, anybody listening to me right now, just I'll like answer this question: do you believe in yourself? Or is yourself that as yourself changes, your beliefs arise? Because in the world there's the known and the unknown, you can shift what is known fear could be not fearful to the unknown. And the outcome has to do with one's future. That means if everybody is starting in their own eyes, in their own view of the worldview, if everybody's starting from their own worldview, then everybody is seeing a different future on Earth. That means even if we built an advanced civilization, people would see it in completely, it wouldn't be one type of advanced civilization. It's as if we are all trying to access truth, not realizing truth, if it is, nothing else can be. You see the strange dilemma. Either there is nothing, nihilists can celebrate, but I don't know what they would celebrate. The other side of the coin is that truth is right here, and it is. Either everything or nothing. It's all or nothing. As long as we entertain a dualistic system, the probability of everything is 50-50, I'm telling you. As when it comes to a sort of multidimensional angle. That means duality. That means if we see things beyond dualism, there is no self and world. That means it's like I'm saying that, like I'm kind of being a maverick here and saying that there's a state that is beyond being a self in a world, or the world leading to a sort of self. And time has to do with the self. The world doesn't care about time. Human beings wear a watch. You know, we don't see a giant watch on oh my god, imagine the equator is the watch the Earth wears. Yeah. But imagine it, like there is no holding of time in that way. Animals, they experience various emotions, but but they, in some sense, they experience different emotions, but it comes and goes. They're like enlightened. It's like the collective unconscious is the whole enlightenment. Because all questions narrow down to what are human beings doing here? Because if a person says, what am I doing here? Then they go into this more cultural modality. Yeah, I got a purpose in this life. Yeah. You know, so they become ideological, centric, you know, and it's not that it's wrong. It's more like there's nothing. Language is like a tool. You can use it in a right way, you can use it in a wrong way. You know, a tool can be used to hurt people, you know, but a tool is designed to actually build, to help people. That means it's like there's no such thing as help. We're just expressing the nature of the mind. It has to serve. That's what expression is. But serve what? That's where the problems have occurred. And there's so many ways you can take a subject and you can wrap a subject around an object. So many ways. It's like it's just different angles. That means, imagine I never, let's say a robot was telling a story. let's say in the future we have androids, you know, telling stories in public just to spread awareness of what's going on, you know. Can you imagine? Like, so let's say these androids, what do they do? An android tells a story, and let's say a group of human beings are, alright, let's see what this android has to say. And they're listening to this android. The android speaks, imagine, and says the story, but because the android never gets tired, because it doesn't have a biological constitution, and it doesn't have a rhythmic constitution, you know, in some sense, the robot story could never finish. That means if a person could communicate till the end of time, one moment of communication could be endlessly stretched. Imagine somebody said, "I have the explanation," you know, to the truth, to the future and everything, and people were like, "What are you saying? How do you have the explanation? You know, how do you know?" And the person says. The person says, I have the explanation, but the explanation is as long as the future, so it will take till the end of time for me to explain it. And the people gave him, the Millennium Prize, right? Or something. So you see, it's like it's possible, but to what constraints? That means sometimes I ask myself, okay, what eyes do I deserve in the moment? Like truly deep down, based on how I have been a human being, what eyes I deserve. And then all my past and everything I felt I lived inefficiently in this life comes to my mind, But if I dig a bit further, I will notice it goes back to how I was just fascinated about what was happening. That's what we forget about childhood, that it's all fascinating all the time. And it's filled with endless geometry. That means if you don't have an imagination, open your eyes. You'll have one very quickly. And it's not that there isn't fear. Like in religious narrative, there's this idea that fear of God is wisdom, right? And I was like, how could fear be a state of wisdom? How could being in fear be a state of wisdom? I wondered about that. Then I realized if a person is doing the wrong thing, it makes sense, right? If the person is doing something wrong, like let's say a person has stepped into a wrong place, to know the way out, is if somebody has come to say that a way out, is that divine, or is that just more of a multidimensional event's necessity? You see, we are creatures that we don't just live in houses, we live in stories. And these stories when you're younger, they don't correlate to reality that much, to physical reality. But as the person lives on, eventually, experientially, they correlate the story of their mind, the story of their life that they're in the moment they're in. They correlate that to, in some sense, reality. So it's kind of like before you have, like, let's say a pilot and pilot's training. Like, what are they realistically doing? I should probably know more about this. But I will say, in some sense, what is happening, right, is that the pilot has to be able to master simply maneuvering through all the complex possibilities in the trip. That means not only be able to keep the interior of the plane in check, but to also be able to navigate. So it's like maintaining your inner realms is one thing, then using it, and while maintaining it, that becomes art, believe it or not, right? Because at some point the person's like, all right, what kind of energy and force, the force, let's say, do I want to use? Do I want to wield? How do I want to wield the force? Do I want to wield the force that I have a lightsaber in my hand and I can jump in the air? Or do I want to wield the force where I'm just chilling in the back and the lightsaber is fighting on its own with the power of my force? It's like there's no necessary for jumping when you have that much force, I don't know. But that means Yoda probably, like all that Jedi's had to do, all that Jedi's in the storyline should have been, I think, they should have had a backpack full of lightsabers. And then if people wanted to fight that Jedi, the Jedi just throws all those lightsabers, and it's like, I don't know, let's say 20 lightsabers fighting at the same time, and the person's just raised their hand in the air, because that's what the mind could do in that story. I think Star Wars has room to grow. But there are also those who wonder about the wars in the stars, and if there is a bigger scene, and if really what's going on is that, like, physical realm is like the battlefield, you know, and then it's like the mind is like the commanding officers in that battlefield, and the soul is like the general that doesn't even need to move, because it is like this, it's like the spirit of the whole movement. It's the deciding factor. You know, so in some sense the soul is mysteriously, you know, or I should say the unknown will that's being free in the moment, that's being freely known to itself in the moment. Whatever this force is, it is, then it does. Because it is, then it does. A majority of the wealth of knowing this realm has to do with how you're being, not to your, not to just how you're being to your own, to your as a body, to your body, but how you're being to your own mind. Like, how are you standing in your mind? That means if like an exact copy of you was standing in front of you, and they could judge you, imagine. Do you know, how would you feel? How would your own mind judge you? Now, this is a very abstract idea, but I would encourage the listeners to follow through with it. So what it is like, if there was someone, imagine if you were in a room with a bunch of your friends, and then you walked into the room, the exact you walked into the room and you sat there, you know? So you were sitting at a table with you know? You know? So if exact, not a time traveler, not something like that, just an exact version of you, going way beyond the bounds of logic. Going way beyond the Shire, you know? One's presence is not ideological, and if they can accept that, they have contentment. That's how I'm telling constantly in these talks to people, you're beyond language, you use language. You are not language. You are viewing it. And of course, I'm just, you know, keep this in mind. I'm just a creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere giving this talk. After some point, the linear becomes a bit boring, you know, and the retaliation to that, usually like the counterculture, if we are to continue, we have to endlessly engage the new. So we have to endlessly be active, in some sense, to be an activity in the realm. If a person becomes inactive, thinking of any sort of position or state of mind, and I've experienced moments where it's been a strange, I would say samadhi-like experience. It's been an experience where I was lifted to be outside of my mind, and that lifting is not you. So that means there is, right now as I'm speaking, there's an attention, and behind every person, and this is of course, keep in mind that you're listening to my podcast, these ideas are personal to me, but I have considered, and I have seen this too much. Like, to me, it is very real that behind every person's mind right now, as I'm speaking, it's like a valve. And concepts, in some sense, there is an antenna, but it's an antenna that is like a bowl where something is being given to it. Right? All movement is like this. I have wondered if this could be a sort of fields doing. That means we are here thinking we're just individual, just there's only our free will, not realizing we are in an invisible field, intelligent field that is maneuvering simultaneously. right? So if that is the case, then it can explain that our minds maybe are beyond our ability to perceive them. What do we do with that as the human species? I mean, like, Charles in the chat section says choice of interpretation determines impact of outcome. Yeah, but there is an instantaneity. There is a spontaneity in response. Like if it, like in life, this is strange. This is what I would say true metaphysics, where when it's like a person waking up while they're awake. What would that be like? And people would think it means you are seeing another world. No, no, no. It means you are seeing more out of the same world. Because if you don't, if a person's metaphysics is just being something that they cannot connect to their humanized psyche, to their mind, human mind, then their metaphysics requires them to be different than what they are now. That's why you see a lot of spiritual behavior with very few spiritual people. Because on some level it's as if they haven't noticed the mustard on their face. The act of communication is co-creation with the world. That means before I'm speaking to the audience, I'm communicating with my environment. This communication is in sense of the environment's communicating to me as if my senses are like a vacuum, like my brain is a vacuum for sensory perception. And it's like it's pulling sensory perception and it is returning back to the world a sphere, a globe. That means we take in sensory perception and then we take in sensory conception and then we have a sort of glow of context arising. Right? I feel that interpretation, I mean, think of it this way. 8 billion different types of human beings with different DNA. That means there's 8 billion ways that the 8 billion different people that can see this world, are seeing this world from their... oh my God. The planet is everybody's responsibility. No one excluded. Chaotic beings, I don't care if you want to be chaotic, you gotta be responsible for the planet so you have somewhere to be chaotic. You're an ordered being, you want to be ordered, you gotta care for the planet, you gotta have a planet to kind of be ordered, And there's so many games of minds happening. That means it's just like creatures just emerging and just the mind is incredible. Without the mind, would you believe it, we'd still be animals. And we are an evolutionary animal, but evolution doesn't explain how an object became a subject to itself. It explains, in some sense, shift, like a gradual long-term change. It doesn't explain why there should be an awareness. Why? Why is a question that is very scary. It's like a giant. Very few people think through why. It's just like it's for like those who are not just who don't want to just fit into life. They want to live, and that only can, in some sense, requires the restoration of the unknown mystery. If the unknown mystery goes, if the unknown is taken from man, his only logic will be to become a machine, because it's the continuity of vision. That means right now we're saying biological continuity, because if we're robots, we technically become immortals on the spot, right? So we have to even protect our species from its own, digitalization. The mind point has to advanced communication. I mean, what else can we I keep going to this, guys, because my strategy is I think I'm in some angles a lazy philosopher, but I also have to stay true to the philosophy. So I try to any idea that I can see shared through another image in a more powerful context, like I aim for usually. It's like, let me tell you the best outcome. No, or not, I shouldn't say best, but let me tell you what I feel is very possible. Few chess moves the civilization does, it will attain this. That means it's like we're done enlightening people. We want to enlighten civilization now. And it's possible. And it has to have a consideration for its multidimensionality. It has to free itself from its linguistic enslavement to certain routes of how the moment is only authorized to move. You know, we are not realizing everybody was an artist. Then we got serious, and then we became, you know, specialists in just a certain angle of the world. That means that it's like the tree of knowledge has forgotten its respect for its trunk, which is singular. Right? We had, like, the species, I would say ultimately its resolve is like you gotta find contentment with the void, the zero dimension I've called it. You gotta, and this is in this idea, I don't know if I've dedicated an episode to it, but it's called Ring of the Absent Heaven. And so I personally perceive my attention. That means, yes, I am a person with a certain background. I am, you know, I have a Facebook page, you know, but at the same time, the mystery of my own intelligence has taken me to a point where, as if, okay, the shape of life is changing, so there has to be something more than just its geometry. And so now I'm at this point where I'm noticing geometry being this endless possibility where it's like the light bulb was there dwelling in the abyss of the void, and suddenly Edison was like, yo, I can make this, you know. And he invents like the light bulb, you know what I mean? He extracts out, he literally pulls out or follows the geometry line of a moment, and he pulls that string and he notices where it leads, and then comes the possibility. There's this story about Edison being young and his mother in a farm, or not in a farm, I don't know where it was exactly, and I want to stay, I'll tell you, the mother was giving birth, I'll just keep it general. The mother was, Edison's mother was giving birth to the brother, and they only had candles in the room, and Edison was so smart that he goes and finds all the mirrors he can find and gets mirrors from the neighbors, and he puts the mirrors behind the candles, right? And it's like, I was like, wow. But then he becomes a bit cruel, you know. I mean, it's like, just because a person is good in one moment doesn't mean, oh my God, we found the avatar of peace. You know, it's changing world. What are we, like, you know? It's our riding. Like, we can have, you know, a different kind of surfers of the rhythms of intelligence in the realm. Right now, we have an ego on intelligence. We haven't entertained a multidimensional context to civilization. This is the true salvation. That in the multidimensional is the salvation to an individual biological being that, in some sense, its mind is defined by language, which language is in some sense dual, but it is ultimately dual, but it has multidimensionality. That means there's so many different types of good and evil the moment you want to see good and evil. You know. Imagine in the future, like, this is a very sci-fi, in a sci-fi universe. Imagine somebody does something evil and they're like, oh my God, that is like level 7,382 of evil. Yeah. You know, or like, you know, they could have so many levels to things, you know, you could see the multidimensional. It's all about how we want to raise the future generations to realize intelligence has nothing to do with your identity. It has to do with awareness as a moment of being. And I feel that is so simple that it's like people have to just notice it and done. That means I feel after people notice that it's all being, it's like, okay, I saw fear, I saw joy, I saw this, I saw that. It's like endless endless imagery. You know, I mean, I love life. I really love it. But I'm telling you, I care enough to wonder beyond myself about it, and I feel we have to do this because that's what an explorer means. You know. You know. This is take this as what I'm saying as just as a story, not as an accurate story. Don't take it as an accurate story. But imagine Christopher Columbus. He was trapped in the house, and Christopher Columbus's mother wouldn't let Christopher Columbus leave the house. And because there was no father, let's say something had happened to the. I don't know his biography, but I'm just saying. Imagine. This is an abstract hypothetical, I'm saying so Christopher Columbus is just looking out the window. It's like, Mom, I want to get out of here. I want to leave this room. I don't want to be here. Imagine, There's some. Oh my God! If I get into European stories, guys, there is such I'm never. I don't think I'm gonna get too into. I don't know, but there is something about, there was some stories I read that happened in the 1500s where there was some levels of psychological cruelty you won't believe, right? You won't believe that it's like they weren't human. Like if you after a certain point you can't. It's like you can see more the animal, but when you look back in history, then you see the civilized. The mind. It's as if the body was didn't need a mind. Now it does. Now the world is happening, in multiple dimensions, and if we ignore this, it's like we're found. So Christopher Columbus, imagine, after being kept in the house so long, he just goes out and he's like, oh my God, the town is another house, the nation is another house, the earth is so big, oh my God. And then he went, and I think there was this essay, I don't know, I remember a teacher of mine in university saying this. It was like something about Christopher Columbus wanting to find something about Eden. He was looking for paradise. Like as if he was even, I don't know if to the religious authorities at the time, like the Christian power at the time, if he was kind of like, people thought he was a maverick or blasphemer, because he was looking for paradise. Can you imagine? Right now, we're like, paradise, Right now, to us, the word paradise is like a pair of dice, But I'll tell you, back then, it was like the mystery of a location to find, And even in Buddhist ideology, in Mahayana Buddhism, there's the concept of the Pure Lands, and that's when your body and mind and let's say the witness beyond are in full synchronization. And when they are, you realize how possible it is to be incredibly blissful. When the yogis say bliss, people are like, that's just a person in a forest sitting beside a tree saying, conscious existence is bliss. But they don't realize that bliss is so multidimensional. It is so vast. It is like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna revealing his true form to Arjuna, and his mind just sees that thing where order is maxing out is the chaos again, right? So it's all, that's why we have the key of balance, the idea of balance. And some people might be like, Mr.Within, this sounds like an imbalanced talk, And I'll tell you, not to the world. We were here once, honestly. I remember I wrote a line of poetry where it was like the microphone is only given once. Every day happens once. Every day's efforts can be implemented. And it's kind of strange where our bodies are existing, but our minds are living more of a life than the body. It is totally possible a person's the mind's life occupying the moment more than the body's life. Right? The mind can have an allure that it makes you dismissive of your body. That's why I'm saying if it's on a communication sense, then the person is communicating with the boundary of their own containment, right? The ring of the absent heaven idea, just to finish painting that part, the idea is beyond the zero dimension, there's the one dimension, two, and the infinity symbol. And why do I say infinity? Because when you have duality, you can see endless dualisms. You can see, like, imagine standing in front of two mirrors. That's literally like a dualism, that is optically, elusively infinite. But just as an idea, it's just supreme. Everybody wants a divine experience. Go stand between two mirrors and wonder, what am I seeing right now, really? There are schools of thought that fear the mirror. The idea of the mirror, they make it as if it's like I don't know, it's like a pond that one shouldn't step too into. But there is also this notion, and I feel that's a limited access. That was more like the fear talking in that point of history. I think from the angle of love, it is really like you care enough to see yourself, right? Because when I look in the mirror, it's sometimes, this may be strange, I don't know how many people have said this statement on this earth, but sometimes it's when I catch myself in a mirror, it's strange looking at my own eyes. That means our experience of the eyes is so just like a flashlight. Like a spotlight. Our attention is like a spotlight, right? That when we bring that attention in the mirror, that light is hitting ourself, right? And if you stand in your own light, you will come to, you're pretty much making the object of meditation your physical self if you look in the mirror too long, The school of thought that sees the idea of the mirror as a companion. Intelligence to me is a companion. It's not something I have. Let me tell you why. Because there is so much change in this world. The moment you hold something, it changed. That means the person's like, I believe this. Then they sleep. We have a unique dream. They wake up and they're like, okay, my it's like they live a day and the day changes them. So we don't just change the world is changing us. And so this is why it's about piloting. It's not about who has the best truth. Let's go, find that person and follow them, for no reason. The idea is like, smarten up. You're here once. And fear comes and goes. Sri Ramana Maharshi has such a liberated quote. He says, this wisdom he shares, he says, let what comes come. He says, let what goes go. Let what comes come. Let what goes go. See what remains. Just take in that idea. This man, this illiterate and liberated sage on a mountain called Arunachala in India, he's literally sharing the most ultimate advanced state of mind, where we have become not in the world, so we suffer by how we have animated our self-reference, but by realizing it's like we are a giant wind, the wind of evolution. I feel evolution is something, an intelligent rhythm is pulling us. And it's not just based on the biology's design. The biology, it's like, it feels like, it may seem like one room, but we know that our sensory sight in the electromagnetic spectrum is like, what is that? That's like, here, I'll show you a picture. There we go. Electromagnetic spectrum. This is the scientist's pride. The most important finding, I would say, on this planet. The most, out of all the scientific results, this is the most fascinating one to me. Because because science, when I think about it, I mean, it's not. It's like they're not being scientists are not. Of course, I can't generalize, but I'm saying that the science is ultimately a method, and those who use that method, the way they're using it now, does not have the fascination the fathers of science did. So you see, it's like an element of fascination is missing out because teachers are forced teaching something that the student should, through their own fascination, come upon. So the idea is not to teach, the idea is to create previews to knowledge. Previews. Imagine how much universities were easier, right? If you could see a preview of a year, you know. That means imagine how much universities would up their game, and the quality would literally become like hotels inside universities. Let me tell you why. Because the idea is, imagine we put all parents 24/7 could see a live stream of the classroom where their students are in, where their children are in. Imagine. Now, I'm not saying this, but I'm saying in the future this may happen. Do you know? Do you know? I mean, like, we it's like if people love drones, they probably love this too. Here, guys, I'm just gonna post the Wikipedia page so people's souls could have, you know, solace. No, okay, just a quick preview. Just try to comprehend the image behind the words. The electromagnetic spectrum is the range of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation and their respective wavelengths and photon energies. Wavelengths and photons, that's the dualism that has been a mystery, I would say, when it comes to what is light. Is it a wave or is it a particle? Like there is that, and it's a mixture of both, actually. That has been I would say the most, I don't know if that's the current, but that when I last checked. Check this out. What is a spectrum? A spectrum is a condition that is not limited to a specific set of values but can vary without steps across a continuum. Yeah, it's just a set of factors in the void that have that they are neighbors. They're all connected. They have a sort of connectivity at work. It's like random connection. Like that's what we see when in some sense one light beam through the Pink Floyd album cover prism becomes like the whole color spectrum, right? The electromagnetic spectrum converts electromagnetic waves with frequencies ranging from below 1 Hertz to above 10 to the power of 25 Hertz, corresponding to wavelengths from thousands of kilometers down to a fraction of the size of an atomic nucleus. This frequency range is divided into separate bands, and the electromagnetic waves within each frequency band are called by different names, beginning at the low frequency long wavelength end of the spectrum. These are radio waves, microwaves, infrared. Yeah, different types of waves and their size, okay, and their speed, I would say. Their size. It's as if, imagine there is, we don't see microwaves, radio waves, we don't see these, but they are there. So waves are happening that people the human eye cannot contain. So we know the human eye is the limited factor. So this human eye cannot fear what it is seeing a little percentage of. You know? And if the person is outcome oriented, of course, like the person will be afraid. I have this thing where personally, like, there's been, I don't know, I mean, every person's eyes have opened differently on this world, but for me, it's like our minds have a presence, and we all are like energy, just to say it in a simple way. I mean, it sounds metaphysical, believe it or not, but it's like that's physics. Energy is thingness. So an object. So what is a subject? We said like this is the angle, right? So a subject, it comes from an object, but an object is energy. What is energy? A subject. So ultimately we're left in. It's not, the issue is not with science, of course. I mean, I'm laughing loudly because let me tell you what angle I'm seeing. I'm seeing it in the sense that whatever accurate scientific result we find and we bring back to society, in a society that has a mind that is oscillating between the known and the unknown, and we have emotions, and different events can happen in the environment, suddenly starting off different emotions. So you see, it's like, and we have this arbitrary force, like, that means it's like materialism makes artists fear their jobs, fear losing their jobs. Who knew? The artists union has to, respond to the philosophy of, inanimate materialism. It's too easy. It's too easy to see ourselves as nothing. I mean, that's not a challenge. That takes like zero energy to like break a house of cards. Zero energy, literally, like, But to care for something, to understand its dimensions, and realizing if something updates, if our intelligence updates, that's multidimensional. From one dimension, it's going to another. So it's like our understanding of the world is changing alongside the world, and I feel our minds, our brains, provide a movement that is faster than the world. Because it's faster than the outer realms, the inner realms are faster than the outer realms, it's animate. But even when your outer realms and inner realms become still, that's a bit spooky, I would say, for culture, those in the cultural program. But it's like, what it is it's like silence remembers itself. I am silence, speaking. We all are silence, listening. Because a person can't speak without hearing their own voice. It's just how nature is designed. So we are the small and the big. The small is interpreting the big from different angles. History has fought over this strange language game. Now, human beings realize that the focus went from value being just how objects are placed and oriented, and are just pretty much efficiency is kind of like rhythmic reform. I don't know how to say it. There's something where those two ideas are very connected. Rhythmic reform, conscious rhythmic reform. That's true intelligence. Scholars in the future will just be rivers. They will be rivers of minds. That means, I'm telling you, philosophers will be the first to enter, or some of the first to enter cyberspace. That's the disadvantage to being a philosopher. Because the philosopher heard the answer and was like, thank you. Now the philosopher's like, what else? And that question is like a force. It's like a Thor's hammer. It's like you couldn't find a hammer, and you just pointed at the sky, and suddenly you looked at this thing, let's say a nail on this table which you had to hit with a hammer, and you just raised your hand in the air, and Thor's hammer out of nowhere just falls into your hand, and you hit the nail. Then you throw the hammer back up, and it goes into the sky. And you salute, not God or gods. You salute the living reality. The most creative civilization, I would say, is if it's 50% Like it's like a yin yang civilization. What that means is a civilization where it's for those who want to get to the future quickly, and a civilization for those who want the past to slowly change. Want the slower the past changes, the more peaceful their life is, for example. Right? So we have human beings being born, some of them care about their past. To me, for example, let's say somebody is stressed or depressed, you know, that person, that has, to me, that is in some sense, how would I say it? It is a person meditating on their past. Those who want to meditate on their past, you become maintainers and updaters. So care for that and serve the mind of civilization that way. Those people who care for the future, they want to go to the front lines. The front lines of the greatest challenges, not for a body moving a mind, for a mind. For we're not just 8 billion bodies here. We are 8 billion biomechanisms that have an ability to arbitrarily pinpoint reality. And so the world is way more mysterious than we have accepted it. Our eyes haven't lied to us, we have just not cared to see beyond. Please tell me this is on mute. Okay. An advanced civilization, I have visions of this. Inner realm visions of this. Where an advanced civilization, just to fathom, and not just any advanced civilization, the most possible advanced civilization on this earth with all the human beings alive here right now. Just to fathom for a moment what that would look like, the most advanced type of civilization. It would, to follow that line of thought, we would get to a point, oh my God, that would mean all dimensions of civilization have been given the most efficient response by the civilization, and all members of civilization are behaving efficiently. But what does efficiency mean into the dualistic paradigm? Is life just a surfboard where between fear and joy we're trying to hold balance? Or should the whole being be used by themselves? Your own life, your life force is here to be a force to be dealt with. You know, but a force in the sense that it has made the discriminatory, it has become conscious, like, okay, the era of animalism is done. Savage animal instincts is boring. That means how much violence are we going to just see, right? So how much we saw enough violence, right? Now what is the advantage of trying to see all dimensions possible? Like, what strategy? That would be the next line of thought. What strategy could we have to bringing about this most advanced civilization? That means we got a little bit of the picture, right? Where all dimensions are advanced. That's the starting point. Now the next thing is, how do we advance all dimensions? This becomes the question. This becomes the question of not national entities, but national entities that are realizing they are also planetary entities. Nationalism is fine, just recognize it's one Earth we have to utilize, and we're 8 billion. And believe it or not, people look at the novel Lord of the Flies and they think that's just a novel. It's reality. But it's in reality on a much more massive scale, right? So, and the response to fear is to try to understand the environment and just respond or continue if you want to continue. And that if is very crucial, because civilization, like, I don't know about efficiency, in regards to the cultural program possible. Like this idea I'm saying is, it feels so out of reach, but at the same time, it's like out of reach, but because there's a window. You know. It's as if truth is beyond the walls of glass, that the story of life is made to house our consciousness as an object. What does the unknown do with the unknown? I would say the strategy would be that 8 billion, who has the power in the world? Like, if we wonder about that question, right? We would see that first, what kind of power? We notice there's different types of power, but then we recognize that every person has to have some sort of power source, like food is power. You know, a person who eats food, they have enough power to live, you know. A person who drinks water, these are sources of energization sources. You know, they like, you know what I mean. So the concept of power is in some sense coming as a sort of how we can. It's like wondering, where is the power? The power is where the free will is, because that's where the story of life is starting. Everybody's free will is where the story of the realm is starting, right? So the power, your true power, is in the story you're being right now. That's the constraints of your power as a being. If you're telling yourself a story where you are, you have already failed before you have succeeded, how can you succeed? If you see, as the Zen masters say, you know, if you want to climb a mountain, start at the top. That means you're already up there. that means the fear makes the undeserving archetype show itself before you have actually found the deserving archetype. It takes the same energy to project thought. That means sometimes I've been like, okay, what are the energies of my thoughts? That means, let's say I have a happy thought. Does that mean it has a different kind of energy, or is it the same energy just moving in a different way, changing in a different way, right? That means energy is a pretty immortal idea, isn't it? It's like if energy had a personality, it would be immortal. Energy can't be created or destroyed, but changes from form to form. It's like another metaphor for the phoenix within. So I would say the power is in human beings, so we require to, I would say, not try to have any, like, the era of ideological enforcement is over. Like, I don't know why beings that we're living in a civilization like that. The civilization should be so multidimensionally tolerant that through its understanding, it just expands the spectrum, you know, rather than collisions and war. You know, war, Isaac Asimov, this incredible writer, he had this saying, he would say, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. That means anybody who's being violent on the earth, you haven't found a gentler way to live here. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, because the mind is here. If we were unconscious animals, sure. Like, if we had descended to a level of savageness post-apocalyptic, sure. Like, in a wild world, there's no decency. If there's no decency left, there's no civility left. If the glow of human decency diminishes in civilization, it's like it's like we'll be like living like animals in forests, but in the concrete jungle. Like, it's ridiculous. We'll be animals in the streets. You know, that means there should be this thing where civilization should be this grand kingdom with walls. Imagine Shingeki no Kyojin style. And so all those people, imagine, who want to be violent, sure, you want to be violent, go live with the wild animals. And imagine there's no longer any zoos, there's just glass parts of the wall. You know? And so the idea is civilization is the kingdom of not just 8 billion, all the human beings that have walked this earth. Why have they been here? Why is the design even here? Right? So implementation. So that means in that idea of like an advanced civilization starting as a kingdom inside a kingdom, and those people who want to be in the lesser kingdom, you know what that means is if you want to be Tarzan, go be Tarzan. But if you want to be literally, why we have to mind the advanced communicator archetype, or you want to pilot through the edges of how far the human species can see before it closes, before the opportunity is no longer at hand, right? So I'm saying we have been society and culture and all those people who think they're it's an illusion or whatever. I'm telling you, culture and language are blindfolds, and the original earth is waiting those who don't who care enough for the unknown. Because the known variables, we know it. The moment I see a known variable, I know it. Done. You know, I know the known variable. Known variables are observable. It's the unobservable, unknown variables in the unobservable universe that fascinate the true advanced communicators, those caring for an era of psychology where it's not just, one person is just giving a story on another person's mind. I mean, what kind of therapy is that? You know, it's like the world has forgotten. It's the effort of humanization, and it's the honor of the life force going somewhere, right? So right now, every person in their own inner realms is like a river. They're like some force of movement. If all these rivers suddenly unite, they become this giant river. This giant river eventually becomes an ocean. Think about a river moving like in a vertical, imagine this is a strange metaphor, but imagine this is a metaphor on a metaphor. Imagine metaphor squared, you know? Imagine the river is going like a line. Now imagine a bunch of lines are still going one direction like a line, you know? Now imagine so many lines joined, it starts becoming curved. Then it becomes an ocean. Do you know? So it's like the concept of an ocean doesn't, you know, it's hilarious. It's like the concept of an ocean doesn't exist because it could all be seen as just rivers, you know? A broken river, you know, a united river. You know, or a person can say the concept of the river doesn't exist. It's all drops, and look at all these, individual drops going this way. You know, and then the person could say there is no. You see, language and the infinite is accessible in the inner realms. In the outer realms, we're finite, we're temporary, and to the ultimate resolve and strategy is like, okay, if let's say right now you were born and you had a very advanced instrument that nobody had on Earth ever seen. Every person with a different DNA, this kind of suggests this. You know? So imagine you're born with this instrument, and you live a whole life where you never played the instrument. You never saw how far the mind and its own self-communication, and let me tell you what self-communication is. The concept of self is nature's communication, ultimately. That means we're here talking as human beings, but it's all nature happening, and we can't ignore this. We should be fearless enough to resolve multidimensionally beyond it. The two most powerful words, I've declared this in one talk, the two in the English language, if somebody was saying the two, it's go forth. That's it. People will realize that is an ultimate, I don't want to say truth, but it's an ultimate to the moment, ultimatum to the moment. When we don't fear change, we start wielding the speed of our advanced mind. Our mind is not advanced because we are saying, yay, it's advanced. No, it's advanced because it is rhythmically abiding, therefore in its own efforts. That means an exploration is a divine experience. You're seeing something you never saw before. What a miracle, you know? So I'm saying that explorer's vision, that is where humanity's future is waiting. minds are not just time travelers, they are time creators. The mind. Look at this, we're calling it a mind. And a person says, my body, my mind, my soul, because what there you can't speak about it when you're being it. So you say my. But that my implies the observer. Right? So after one is content with the known and the unknown, then there comes the choice. So I'm saying now, imagine we went to all the people who wanted to be violent in civilization and we were like, okay, hear us out. Let's say the peaceful people are trying to make an argument for peace, okay? They go to all the violent people on the planet and they say, okay, you want to be violent? Sure, you can be violent. But wonder about first, before wondering about a lot in life, it's okay to be violent. Just wonder about this first. What would the most advanced state of peaceful living look like? Not what we've seen on TV, not what's in literature. I'm just saying human beings for themselves wondering for a moment, what would be the most advanced, what would peace give us? That means if we had a list and we're like, what is the advantages, disadvantages of peace? And just why we should start living as minds. And then this is why Bertrand Russell gave this incredible advice. He said, a moral advice. He said tolerance and charity. He said that to the future generations. I don't know how many people listen. Some people in the scientific community, there's scoldings on other human beings and how they are in some sense an effort in this life. Seems as if they haven't heard. You see, because it is so easy to just get lost in the geometry and become dehumanized. A person that have you heard, probably people know this, but they call this like, there isn't just a mad scientist, there's a mad artist. But this mad artist is mad, actually mad. Like not like when I say mad, I mean anger. The art, it's like an angry artist. Do you know what I mean? Now, the point of this is because art requires the unknown. And the unknown is trying to be shaped with what is known. That means the known is like the color palette, and then the unknown is being, in some sense, the painting of how the whole world has a context in accordance to all of that unknown. I don't know how to say it, but I feel all the stories we have come up with so far on the earth is not enough. And even to realize that we are way beyond language and there is something going on here. I don't know what it is, but it's the best way to explain it in a secular way is a field-like and rhythmic activity when minds are their attentions are in a common presence. So there is, it's strange, but it's as if not only people's minds are not only is the mind like a harbor of worlds, but so many ways the world can happen. The most advanced vision of a peaceful civilization will be that we were patient enough and multidimensional enough to try to see and build a network, a global network of conscious ideology and conscious efforts of living. That means imagine the person has lived whatever kind of life and they're like, okay, I want to serve the civilization, serve the living realm. It's honestly an honorable thing. Any human being that exists right now, slow and clap for yourself. You're existing in the space-time continuum. I mean, that's something, Literally, that's something, So, anyways. Different elevations, different eyes, different truths, yet one plane, and the pilot flies through. attention is just here. This is important to accept. Then what is in your attention is important to accept, because if a person doesn't accept something, they can't see it. If you can't see it, you can't understand it. And when I say accept, I'm not saying like ideologically. I mean like if you can't see like a cup of coffee, you can't accept that there's a cup of coffee there, right? You know, it's like that hilarious moment. Imagine, like, this is hypothetical, but imagine there's two people, person A and person B. And person A goes to person B and says, hey man, and they're completely in a normal state of mind. You know, both are like the same state of mind. And in some sense, person A says to person B, I see a coffee on that table, a cup of coffee on that table. And imagine that person B, person A says this to person B. Person B says, I don't see a cup of coffee on that table. Now, is that, can we say that is like, you know, how would we contextualize that metaphysics? Do you know? Like, so I'm saying, and that cup of coffee, in some sense, can't be on the table, cannot be on the table, and it's the discrimination of the inner realms. It's how much the person is in the reality sphere, and they have dared to be in the moment. And as I've said in other talks, you let the world make the first chess move. So you watch the world. That means it's like the person's like, I don't know what example to use, but the world turns and we turn with it. The advancement I'm speaking about is kind of just this, following this line of thought, is like just to see what it would look like. That would be the emotional justification. For now, I have concluded coin-like sky cities where we are living the opposite. That means skyscrapers will be pointed at skyscrapers one day. Trenches of ideology, that means there's like every day a person just accesses, especially technology, there's information explosion, there's events. Now if the person cannot or doesn't dare to like, there has to be an effort beyond what is here now for what is here now to be beyond this. So if there is, it's strange, but if one wants to see the beyond, they have to be it first. Before you can do anything, you gotta realize how it's being, how something is being. You know, sometimes when I look at people, and I don't, it's not their ideas that are important, it's how they're being. That means it's as if like a person can be at peace with their moment. Those people who are at peace with their moment, like all children, they don't have context, they don't have structured context for the world yet. So they're at peace technically. They don't know what the opposite of peace is yet. Just like they don't know what peace is, they don't know what the opposite is, right? And it's really what kind of ideology the civilization is inputting and programming in the minds of the future generations. For me, the educational systems are massive, like it's a typewriter. The whole system is a typewriter. If the student gets crushed in whenever it's being written, because it's designed for a militaristic angle, because somebody said this. It was like literally a TED talk on it. I think Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know. I think it was him, but I could be wrong. Anyways, the idea was that the educational systems we see all over the planet, it's common to say, we can say that there were during a time of war, what kind of educational system would be designed? From the imperial system, during a time where Morse code was used, the soldier had to go to one bunker, memorize the information exactly, and run to the other bunker and instantaneously be able to share it back. Rather than the assignments of the educational system, the exams of the educational system actually being like exploration efforts. That means the educational system is like, there's no longer students, there's no longer teachers. What is this? We're all explorers of one earth that's here, right? And every person's exploration could have not only a monetizable value, but an honor point value. That means if you tackle a giant problem, the educational system notices it, And so the whole idea is children are creative when they're young, right? All children everybody was creative when they were young, to some degree. So everybody, the child is creative, then it has to follow a structure, and if its intelligence and nature as a being is not able to align to that system, to that, it's like 8 billion different DNAs, really one educational system for all these. Like there has to be a completely different angle. So ultimately, we become explorers of the space-time continuum, and there is no right and wrong. There is just the most updated view and a database and an archival care. That means all the ideologies before 2020, we should treat them as a museum. All. I don't care how much. Like even my own talks, I'm saying, like, before 2020, museum. Everything before that is a museum. What that means is, like, whatever ideology, we just walk past the idea and no longer ideological attachment. And there comes this priority for peace is what can bring the future the quickest. That is why. It's not even a, compassion reason. It's just a smart reason. Right? It's like so it would be like, to the selfish person, you want to be selfish in an advanced world, and if peace brings the advanced world, you got to endure the peacefulness to experience the ultimate selfishness. And for the selfless people, we're like, you got to endure the ultimate selflessness until you got to endure the selflessness until you experience the ultimate selflessness. You see, and these are all just linguistic games, and when a person becomes content, then they're being a presence in the realm. Right? And nature notices it. And that's when life becomes very, I don't want to say ideological. It's like the language for me, my days are very, very strangely, there is an incredible silence. Like, I notice the silence every day. Every day has a silence. Even in the morning, if the person just sits when they wake up, just for a little bit, for the body to kind of warm up, for the body to awaken. Just sits there, and I don't know, you can drink water too if you want, but it's like the time violence, if the world becomes an anarchist, violent place, it would simply be boring. Why? Because we saw that dimension. How long are we going to look at violence? Oh my God, are we still looking at violence? Like there should be something more, right? So when we get, if chaos is like singular, there's but it's like, it's just randomity. Believe it or not. So from this randomity came order. That's Greek mythology for you. From chaos came order. And order's wondering where it's going. And the question has to be, where's chaos going? And imagine if we could recycle violence. All those people who wanted to be violent, we first took it into cyberspace, but then we made them violent in a sort of, like in a digital sphere. Like I want to see, like, an advanced civilization is going places, It's like instantaneous effort to move shape as shape, yet the movement of the shape is instantaneous. So we move shape as shape, shapelessly. We don't know what to call the shapelessness. The hard problem of consciousness is there. We come to that corner beyond the hard problem. Guess if the problem leads to beyond the language threshold, the answer can't be on paper. That means if we want truths on paper, that is different than if we want the experience of it. Right now, imagine building a civilization where by being peaceful, tolerant, multidimensional doesn't mean being something specific. So we kind of ignore the agenda sort of with that, So to be alive means to not only see what that life is, but to then wonder what can be done with it. And every person's life can be said to be a pattern, as if their whole life is drawing a line in history. We're all like lines being drawn on a piece of paper, and that's becoming human history. So every person is leaving behind a sort of line, whether it's scribbly if they were violent, or whether it's straight if they were non-violent. If they were passive, it could just be straight. They could regret not it being scribbly, If it's scribbly, they could regret it not being. And ultimately, the idea is, in a multidimensional era, there is nothing to fear because there's more dimensions to it. So the concept of fear and, believe it or not, the concept of love cannot exist. Right? It's not that the concepts can't exist. The experiences are very real, but the concepts can't exist in a multidimensional realm. That means language. This is where I'm saying if there may be beyond language, our eyes become not the storyteller, they are the whole story. Because our fear comes from our environment. The more advanced our environment, the less our fear. Right? Imagine children were, future generations opened their eyes in a world where the civilization was so advanced that if they made a mistake, the advanced civilization would be like, I got you. And the advanced civilization would use that mistake and recycle it into efficiency. an efficient vision backup system. The future has work to do, but work that we may not understand what we stand under currently. That means if a person has this idea that if they want to serve this realm, serve the future of the species, that's it. And beyond ideas, beyond ideas, it would have to be through, I don't know, just a sort of decency signal. The mystery of the mind, I would say, is like, again, it goes to the spontaneous. That means as a mind, it's as if like I am never here, but I am where everything is. Right? As a body, I am here. The mind is like still what I'm in, but also like the outer realms is so vast. That means it's like who knows where the edge of the sky is. We at least know one edge of it. Actually, we know one edge of it, which is our eyes, but the other edge we don't know. That means a person can say, I found the edge of the sky, I just opened my eyes. And it's events. That means when people wonder about where language comes from, that means think of a time where there was no language and it was just behavior, silent behavior. And this silent behavior transformed into an ability to communicate. So we first found a way to communicate to ourselves, to become conscious of ourselves. Then we have found ways to become conscious of what's the word I want to use? The cultural, social dimensions of the one advanced civilization. Because how can we say we know what it is to be a human being even? Like that idea is very like you like philosophy can sometimes go beyond. Philosophers are like infinity watching the finite. That means it's like the infinite will doesn't mean there's ever a philosophy. Technically, true philosophy is endlessly searching for the ultimate philosophy, I would say. The ultimate view of the realm, Oh my god, this talk is all over the place. I think emotions are wielding this talk more than a linear angle, but violence is not worth it, but people have to express that energy somehow, so they express that, let's say, in cyberspace or in systems that advanced civilization will create for them to engage. And it's all about self-awareness. That means everybody has blind spots. We know this, and especially we know this when we drive. So if we know we have blind spots, if the advanced civilization, whether through technological or natural or any sort of dimensional innovative means, kind of take care of all of our blind spots, then let me tell you, I feel this is going to happen in the sense where they say in the future everything's going to become automated, so we're going to inevitably be left as minds, because the rest of the thing it can be done robotically, right? So that would mean a complete new era of wondering, what should the human being do? We should ask this question on so many levels. What should the human being do on Earth? What should the human being do if they were in empty space? What should the human being do if they were on different planets, on different sectors in space? And so when love enlightens fear, then fear and love have nowhere else to go but towards the novelty of really what can be done here. That means I don't know. I mean, I'm just a person saying, like, you know, advanced civilization, but in my inner realms I'm like, at least I said it. You know, at least let there be a human being who you know, uttered these words in this realm. Yeah. Because it's like, believe it or not, it's an oscillation between absolutism and these are like the edges of the spectrum of thought. Either something can be completely multidimensional. When the infinite comes, you find this in human psychology. I'll give you an example. When a person is having fun, we say time flies. That means there's no time. So when a person is having fun, they're engaged in the experience. Now, the energy behind that experience doesn't have a personality. The personality is coming from the relationship with the environment. Now, to some degree, I would say majority. I'm not saying there isn't a choice, but I'm saying, like, so the environment. I came to explain something while explaining another thing, and then the geometry fell. The creative dimension of intelligence ultimately is like the known going towards the unknown. My final statements. You cannot be afraid of life, only its outcome. Because beyond the outcome, life has nothing to be afraid of. The past is past, the present is here, and the future hasn't come. The future is alive in our minds, but we have to live it, we have to bring it. And so, if all the violent people ask that, do they love their minds? And if people care to see the advanced instrument, it's like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Excuse me,